Today we'll take a look at chemical energy and ATP. We've been discussing energy for a while now, and we understand the concept of energy flow, and we know that energy flows in one direction. All life on Earth is dependent on the sun's energy, which sends its radiant energy to our planet, and that energy is used by producers like this green plant to perform photosynthesis. And through photosynthesis, this plant will make its own food in the form of sugar. Now that plant is going to get consumed by this adorable bunny rabbit who will now get the energy. And the fox is going to consume that rabbit and get the energy. And then this decomposer is going to decompose the fox, and it's going to get some of the energy as well. We know this process is not efficient. We know that energy is lost every single step of the way, every time we move up a trophic level. Today we're going to take a closer look at processes involved in this energy flow. So we're going to look at photosynthesis, and we're going to look at cellular respiration. So what are these processes? During photosynthesis, plants are going to take in carbon dioxide and water. So here the carbon dioxide and water is going into this chloroplast, which is found inside of plant cells. And photosynthesis is going to happen with the help of the energy provided by the sun. And as a product, the plants are going to produce their own food in the form of glucose, which is a sugar. So cellular respiration is what happens with that glucose. So it's not enough to make glucose. You have to break apart the bonds inside of this glucose sugar. You have to break those bonds to get the energy out of it. And the way to get the energy out of glucose is through cellular respiration. So during cellular respiration, organisms are going to use oxygen and glucose as their reactant, and through the process of cellular respiration, they're going to break apart the glucose and they're going to get some ATP out of it. And ATP is the form of energy used inside of our bodies. Cellular respiration happens both inside of plants and inside of animals. Plants make their own glucose, but they still have to break it to get the energy out of it. Animals eat glucose through their diet, and they have to get the energy out of it through cellular respiration. So here are the two equations we'll take a look at in this chapter. The first is photosynthesis. And just like I mentioned earlier, plants take in carbon dioxide and water, use energy from the sun, and they produce sugar and oxygen. If you take a look at respiration, you're going to compare it to photosynthesis and notice that respiration is really pretty similar to photosynthesis backwards. So here we're going to start with oxygen from the environment, and we're going to take in sugar. If you're a plant, you're making your own sugar. If you're an animal, you're getting it from your diet. And through the process of respiration, the products that are formed are carbon dioxide, which is a waste product, water, and ATP. And this ATP is energy that you can use to do work. And this is the whole point of respiration, to get that energy out of the sugar. So I've been telling you that all life on Earth is dependent on the sun, and technically there's an exception. And that exception is the chemoautotroph. It's based on chemoautotrophs. And these organisms live in places where scientists never dreamed life would be possible. They actually found whole communities of living organisms in these deep sea vents in the ocean. So deep in the ocean, there is no sunlight at all. Those organisms live in complete darkness. And somehow they managed to survive. So how did they survive without photosynthesis? Well, they're doing something known as chemosynthesis, and they're using the energy inside of chemicals instead of the energy inside the sun to build glucose. So here's an example of a deep sea vent. You can see one organism that lives here. It's this mussel, which actually has a symbiotic relationship with a chemosynthetic bacteria. And down here you can see chemosynthesis. It's kind of similar to photosynthesis with some differences. So you start with carbon dioxide and water, but you also have hydrogen sulfide, that chemical, as a reactant. And through the process of chemosynthesis, sugar is still produced, right, which can be then used for energy, and then some sulfur compounds are released as a byproduct. So I'm going to show you some footage of chemosynthetic organisms that were found in deep sea vents. So this is pretty cool. There's all these life forms, and scientists were shocked to find these. There was this remotely operated vehicle that actually went down and took this footage without people behind the wheel. This is what life without photosynthesis looks like. And these tube worms are really, really interesting because they too have this symbiotic relationship with bacteria that are performing chemosynthesis. They're getting energy, bypassing the sun entirely and getting energy from chemicals. Okay, so we've been talking about ATP and energy, so we're going to take a closer look at ATP now. ATP actually stands for adenosine triphosphate. It is known as the energy currency of the cell. It's what our cells use for energy. Think of them as batteries. It is the principal compound used to store and release energy in cells, and it is formed when molecules like glucose are broken down. So when we break down glucose, we get energy out of it in the form of ATP. And ATP can be used to do work. So this person over here looks like he completely overate during Thanksgiving dinner, and now he's going to need to do work in his body to digest all of that food. And he's going to have a bunch of chemical reactions take place in his digestive system. And those chemical reactions are going to be powered by, you guessed it, ATP. So the structure of ATP. ATP has 3 phosphate groups. That is why it's called adenosine tri for 3, triphosphate. Look, 1 phosphate, 2 phosphate, and 3 phosphates. That's ATP. When a bond of the 3rd phosphate group is broken, so when this bond is broken, energy is released, and that energy can be used to do work. However, when that phosphate group is released, you kind of get a drained battery. You get something known as ADP. And ADP is adenosine diphosphate. Di for 2. It's only got 2 phosphates. So once you have ADP, you're going to need to charge it again the same way you need to charge your cell phone or your Chromebook when the battery is low. So you can charge that ADP back to ATP, break a bond from ATP to release energy, and get back to ADP and keep going between the two. So how do animals get this ATP? And we've been hinting at this, but carbon molecules inside of food, those chemical bonds, store chemical energy. When foods are eaten, digested, they are sent to cells where that ATP is then made. So here you can see starch, which is found inside of potatoes. And if you break these bonds, you can get energy out of this starch molecule. And here's glucose over here. Both of these are types of carbohydrates. So ATP in foods. Different food types provide different amounts of ATP. Carbohydrates are the ones that are most commonly used for energy, and they include things like bread, cereal, rice, pasta. This is the carbohydrate category right here. Proteins like meat and eggs can also be used to make ATP, but they usually aren't used to make ATP. They're used to do other things, which we're going to learn about. But when they are used for ATP, they give you about the same amount of energy as carbs do. And then lipids are used for storage. Lipids are your fats. They include fats like butter and oil, and they can store large amounts of energy. In fact, 80% of the energy in your body is stored in lipids. So if you look at this chart, carbohydrates will give you 4 calories per milligram. Proteins will also give you 4 calories per milligram. And then here are the lipids that are storing all this energy, 9 calories per milligram. So the last thing to cover is how do plants get ATP? So animals get it by eating that stuff, proteins, carbohydrates, and lipids. Plants get their energy through photosynthesis, and they make their own sugar, their own glucose. And they break down that sugar through cellular respiration to make ATP. So I hope that was helpful. Thanks for watching.